Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. It's been a while, but we're talking to Rabbi Grufein again. As you know, on the channel, we've been pretty busy looking at a bunch of different things, but it's now time to get back to our favorite rabbi in Jerusalem. And so we were just talking about all the Christmas decorations in the back here, and I was telling him that I'm trying really hard to get it down as soon as possible, because if we don't knock it out right away, it stays up until like February and March, and that has happened before. And I have like this the village pieces right here. There's one Christmas where I got Jenica because she really wanted like a large Christmas village, and so I just like went all out and got as many as I could, and it's just been like expanding, and so it's fun. Some of them aren't working anymore though. Wait, hold on, let me turn on. I meant to
Whoa,
turn that on. Ooh.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Very
So anyway,
nice.
yeah, so it's been a while, and I had a question for you.
Sure.
Um, I guess just to jump right into it. I recently did a video about the red heifers. I was like looking at all the different sources I could find of like when they came to Israel, because it seems like there's been like a few different groups of them that have come that are potential candidates. And I looked at the dates, and it seems like all of them would turn 2 years old in one day in a time range between um what was it? As early as September until April, and then the last group or last one or whatever, April of this year. And so I was wondering just like if you knew anything about that, or like if one of them did get to that point, 2 years and one day, do you know how things would go? Would they try and get the ashes right away, or would they wait for a certain time before they do that?
Well, listen, I want to tell you, I think I might have sent this once upon a time, but my teacher always told me better a good question than a bad answer. And that's a very good question. And I don't want to give a bad answer. So I'm going to just like rabbi from the hip
Okay.
and, or hip rabbi, and just throw out what came to my mind. There's a big question when kosher ritual slaughter is performed on a kosher animal, whether or not the animal can be frozen. In other words, there's a whole problem of when you slaughter an animal and the blood comes out, and is the blood drained, and how is it drained? It's a whole really complicated situation. And there became a huge debate because a lot of the animal meat coming into Israel comes from Argentina. So the question was how to preserve that, and if you could, if suspended animation is considered a frozen aspect of stopping time. So I would think that if I were part of the rabbinical court that was dealing with the issue that you're raising, my first question would be that if the animals were properly processed, even if the ashes were made and so on, would that be considered as fresh, or do you even need fresh ashes? I mean, could you have like ashes, like, ashes which are stashed? Never thought of the word ash and stashed before, but can they be tucked away? And then, so in that case, maybe you're right. If it's got to be in that time window when the animal is fit, maybe it should be processed and everything could be put into deep freeze or something of that nature. And then when it becomes appropriate to actually start the sprinkling, I don't know. That's why I say it's a good question. I don't really know. I haven't done that deep a deep dive on that subject.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine that they'd have to make a decision pretty soon, because if you get to that point, you get to the point where it's like 2 years and one day, and they're still perfectly red, except, everything except for just one or two hairs, then I would imagine that you'd want to do it right away, so that not risk the chance that, hairs turn a different color after that point. So,
Well, it's funny you mentioned the two hairs because I used to be a flaming redhead. I know it's hard to believe, head to toe. And I remember at a certain point, I looked at my hand and I noticed there were two little black hairs, and I'm shoo.
it's funny. So, okay, I guess we'll just have to see how things play out over the next few
Yeah,
weeks.
it wasn't it Frank Zappa who always said, "Don't touch that dial," right? Just
Yeah.
stay tuned. God will not disappoint us. I promise you that.
And
Hey,
then,
wait, hold on. Come
yeah.
on. Let's play this game. And me, Kyle, we know each other for like what, a week now, right? So let's play this game. So all of a sudden, after umpteen, who knows how many years, we're waiting for the Messiah. First time, second time, that's really a mute point, but it's the man that's the important issue. And the Messiah shows up, and all of a sudden, like according to one opinion, that the third Beit Hamikdash comes prefabbed out of heaven. The whole world is freaking out, watching this. Everyone, I mean, it's just amazing. And now all of a sudden, they're about to sprinkle the red heifer process onto the priests so that they could go into this brand new made in heaven temple. And one guy goes, "Ah, he's 3 weeks too low. We can't use this one." That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Whatever will Hashem, God will provide at each moment. But of course, we have to make our efforts. So that's why it's still a valid question. And we're making our effort. We're trying to get things prepared. There are thousands of Kohanim priestly garments already prepared, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is really kind of there. So I'm sure the people who were dealing with this was a huge financial investment. And there was also a lot of time that was done between the United States and over here. I just don't think they'll drop the ball with that's my my hope, my gut feeling.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like it's all like coming together because the video that I did that got me on Israel 365's radar is I did like a compilation of a bunch of articles they did about just different things having to do with the Kohanim and doing like practice or mock kind of like rituals or sacrifices or demonstrations, whatever you want to call it. And just like all these like different things that they've been doing to prepare. Um, I guess they've created like at least one or two different altars that can be used to uh be disassembled and reassembled up on the Temple Mount if like that time came where they could do that. And so yeah, there's been a lot of preparation going on. There's the Temple Institute. And right now, as we speak, we have these red heifers that seem like they're about to be of age and the proper purity or kosherness to be used. And then at the same time, uh, just a few months ago, the war started in
Mhm.
Israel, and so it feels like a bunch of different things are kind of coming together. Are
Oh,
you? Yeah, go ahead.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that there are things going on here in Israel which the media would never touch with a 10-foot pole. Although I don't know if you remember Gary Larson, Far Side.
yeah, I love farce.
Oh, so one of his things was a guy sitting there making and selling poles, and they were called 11-foot poles for things you wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. So, but there
Well,
are, I'll tell you what's going on. The big news here is
yes,
almost all the Israeli soldiers are now wearing tzitzis.
yeah,
So you see these guys coming in, bodies totally tattooed, completely secular, as far away from religion as you can imagine. And all of a sudden, and not even with the yarmulke, and all of a sudden you look and you see that they're wearing tzitzis. That this is extraordinary. And in the Knesset, the secular development of this country was vehemently anti-religious and did not want. In fact, there were even people who wanted to call the land Canaan. They were very, very anti-religious, and the parliamentary building, the Knesset, has always been a kind of a secular base. And now, every time you're watching the TV and you hear the head of the army or this one and that, and they're all talking army, 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 which is what they do always. But now all of a sudden they send at the end, and with God's help, you have no idea. This is phenomenal to hear God's help from these secular senior officers of the army being spoken in the Knesset. This is mind-boggling. There is a renaissance of awakening going on in the nation, which is also part of the prophecies, by the way. So this we call in Hebrew the tshuva, the return.
yeah.
So this is yeah. There's a lot of energy here, and everybody wants to be a little tampered down because you don't want to put your number on the card and then suddenly find out, well, not quite yet.
And just in case you guys didn't what I did a video about that, the fact that there are soldiers now wearing how's it pronounced? Sits?
It's
How I did a video a while back, like a month ago or something like that, because Israel 365 did a article about that. And it if you don't know what that is, it's essentially it's like on the four corners of like well, can you explain it? It's like the four fringes that come off of like your like a top piece that you wear either under your clothes or over your clothes. There's both versions. Uh, and that comes from the book of Numbers, right?
Well, I don't know what numbers are, but yeah, it comes from the Bible, correct?
Right, right. Well, it comes from the Torah at some point.
Right.
And when is it that you're supposed to wear that? Because from what I can tell, it doesn't seem like all Jews like wear that, but some do, and I don't know like when you do or when you don't.
Right. So okay. So it's the commandment to wear them is only if you're going to wear, and again, without going into the specifics as to the exact measurements and size, if you're going to wear a garment that has four squared, not round, but squared off corners. So
Okay.
if you're not going to wear such a garment, then you have no obligation to put these threads, of which each corner has 8 strings that they're really 4 strings, but they become 8 when they go through the hole. And then they're tied in a series of numbers and wraps, which are very Kabbalistic, but they represent various, from the moment of creation, all the events that ever happened. And the knots are these key milestones. And then from that point, they go loose, because the loose part represents the future. In other words, until now, so to speak, God has tied it, and now man is part. We tie them as we don't physically tie, but in a sense that's why they hang loose. It's as if to suggest that we're tying our future into God. And normally, like here, just happen to have one with me. I'm saying here, and normally many of them have. See, that's what's referring to here. So on the corner, you have these knots. You can see them there. And then you have various numbers of the wrappings per se. And then at a certain point here, then they're completely loose, if you will. And so that's the metaphor. The metaphor is that obviously everything unfolds according to God, but there will be human participation. In other words, when we're involved, we have to do what we have to do, but we don't know how God's going to knot it up, so to speak. But we know it's God who's going to knot it up, but we participate. Now, of them, of the strings, there is one string. Hold on, let me just sort of fish it out. Oh, here we go. There's one string here, which is of a different color. Okay, see, I talked about knotting them up, and it's already knotted up. Here we go. It's stuck. So you have this one is, I guess it's kind of like a turquoise. I don't, but the word in Hebrew is called tchelet. Tchelet is not blue. It really is, I guess, like a sapphire. Well, maybe a little too dark for sapphire, but it's a tchelet is like kind of this. Well, it's this color. How's that?
Okay.
It's this color, and Hebrew is called tchelet. Now, that word tchelet is a very interesting word because it also has another meaning, which means purpose. So when you say it has the word meaning purpose and also has the word meaning of the word like goal, which I guess can be one and the same. Like you would say, what's the tachlit going on here? Tachlis, what are we talking about? Like bottom line, what is this? So therefore you have this. See, the reason it's 2 is because it's really one string, because there are really 4 strings that go through this corner, and thus
Mhm.
they look like 8. But the blue string is uh, the blue string is the key, because it says in the Talmud that when you are worried, you should go to the ocean and look, because subliminally, the flat ocean will calm your nervous waves. It'll like smooth, it'll impact you, visualization, it'll impact you, make it smooth. And when you see the blue of the water, then you bump it up to the next level, and then you'll see the blue of the sky. And when you see the blue of the sky, then you'll bump it to the highest level, and you'll think about God's throne, which is this color. So it has a two-way effect. One, this color, by looking at this, will say, oh, right, God is all around me. That's why it's on the 4 sides of the garment. No matter east, north, west, wherever I go, God is there.
Mhm.
And therefore, I'm in the middle, meaning to say that God is my protector. That's why the tzitzits have very mystical, very high potency of protection. So that's why a lot of them wear, these soldiers wear them, because it's Jewish body armor. And then from there, so it brings you to the highest level of remembering God on his throne. And then, of course, in converse, it comes all the way back down. And to me, I'm not a number. I'm a person. I got a name, right? And therefore, that makes me unique, because God doesn't make any 2 snowflakes the same. Certainly, he doesn't make human beings the same. And therefore, every human being is precious to God. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Everyone's precious to God because, I mean, if you believe in one God, there's only one God who made all of us. So that's what the tzitzis do. That's why in the Bible, the language is, it says, don't go after your hearts and your eyes because these things can confuse you in this world. And then it says where the tzitzis to, which will remind you of God. And no matter what things seem, you will know that God, I'll put it differently. One voice you never heard God say coming out of heaven was, whoops,
Yeah.
right? God never drops the ball ever. Sometimes it's tough to get through it, but God never drops the ball. And that's bottom line of what the tzitzis remind of. And the word tzitzis, by the way, can also mean like a spark, or you have a thing which is like a tzitz, which is you have a wall and some grasses growing out. So that's what it looks like. It's sort of like they sprout out of the garment.
Okay. So two questions.
Sure.
I'm still watching like that channel I've told you about before. It's called I don't think I said the name before, but it's called Esoterica. He's like a secular Jewish guy, but he wears, you know, yarmulke and all that, and he has a beard. He looks like he's like Orthodox Jew, but he's like secular. But he's like a scholar, and he talks about all different sorts of topics, including um just esoteric things in Judaism. And I was watching some of his videos about Kabbalah. And let me know if this is right. He said that I think a lot of people when they hear Kabbalah, if they know anything about it, they picture the tree of life, like the typical like depiction of the tree of life. And he was saying something to the effect that what's supposed to happen is like that's like the ideal arrangement of the spherot. That I guess what's happening is that through the performance of mitzvot, like it's an attempt to try and bring everything into a proper arrangement and balance, and that's like the end goal. And is that kind of like what the Tzitzit are is kind of like, because you said that there's like Kabbalistic elements to it, how it's kind of like chronological and it goes off into the future. So is it like a reminder, or is it trying to like point
No,
you to
no.
that idea?
Oh, yes, very much so. And both. I mean, you know that the name of God, the highest name of God, has 4 letters.
Yep.
So the tzitzis have 4 corners. And each one of those corners represents a different letter, if you will. That's so you're really kind of engulfed in the name of God. And the further idea is, though, there are different ways to extrapolate the Hebrew letters of God's name. And based on them, there are 4 ways they can be extrapolated. And based on them, they have numerical values. And these numerical values represent hierarchies of power. As it says in the Bible, that in the Garden of Eden, then 4 rivers came out of one river out of the Garden of Eden. So those are the 4 letters now coming out of the Garden of Eden, so to speak, into this world, and each one having its thing. Now, what God did is God created, because God is God, so everything God does is perfect. But yet, when we look around our world, that's probably the last word we would look based upon what we see. So how does that happen if God created perfect? So there's a lot of answers to this, but the crib notes answer is that God created a process of perfection, so that over a period of A to Z, this time will culminate in the perfection that was thought of. This is hinted at if you draw a circle. The part of the circle, which is the end, which is the furthest from the point, is actually right next to the point. Right? So you start with an idea. Now you're going further, further, further. Now you're all the way as far as you can be, but yet you're right back next to the beginning point. So this is in Hebrew called Sof Maaseh Machshava Tchila, which means the last thing you do is the first thing you thought of. For example, right now you're sitting there and you say, wow, I got to go get a Coca-Cola. Fine, that's what you thought. But what do? You stand up, you walk into the kitchen, you open the refrigerator, you find the Coca-Cola, you open the Coca-Cola, and now you're drinking it. So the last thing you're doing is the very first thing you thought of.
Yeah.
So this is the idea. God had this idea of a perfect creation. And it will be, because that will be from God's first thought, that will be the last action. But this window here is the process of getting there. Now, here is the irony, this spoil alert on all the reason of creation. The irony is that this is an illusion, really, because there is no such thing as time. Time is just an earthly creation that God created. So, in this facade of creation, which creates a new thing called time, which, by the way, God's four-letter name actually means is, was, and will be, because for God, there is no time. Everything is now. Everything that ever happened, everything will happen. But God says, ooh, that's interesting. That never happened either, right? Because God knows everything. So therefore, God knows everything, and God knows everything without the time, which is just like God looking down. Oh yeah, I made this little thing in here, and oh look, in there's time. So the only framework in which time exists is our world. So therefore, as far as we're concerned, well, this is real life, and we're on a linear line of time, although not exclusively. There are parallel universes and so on. But simply said, we're walking through time. But that's only because that's what God, in this little box, that's what God created. So, but ultimately, from God's point of view, it's already perfect. But God created a sensation, an experience, a situation where it could seem as if this process is unfolding. And the way that happens is, of the four extrapolations, one of them, which is associated with the number 52, which is interesting because 52 throughout Judaism always means destruction. Maybe that's why the Americans had the B-52 bombers. But 52 is always about destruction. And that's the lowest level of the four, which is associated with the world that we live in called Malchut, the last of the 10 Sfirot, which is the world of lies, the world of darkness, the world of evil. It only exists here, where we are, by the way. So, and then what happens is the second from the bottom, which is 45, which is the Hebrew word ma, as in Passover, ma nishtana halayla hazeh, etc. So on that level, that one is running to catch up to the 52. And that one brings on all what we would call the evil and the destruction, it's bringing the repair and the healing so that when the two of them finally touch, that's the end game. And that end game is period of Mashiach, third temple, resurrection of the dead. People actually can talk nicely to each other. And I think the greatest novelty of the Messiah will be that when you talk, other people actually listen. Can you imagine that?
That would be nice. Okay. All right. And then the other question with the four of them, you said that each one corresponded to one of the letters of God's name. Is there like a specific one, like the front right one, it's associated with this letter, and then the front left, or is it just like it doesn't work like that?
There is, and I don't know it. I
Okay.
apologize.
And uh having them kind of correspond to the four directions, the cardinal directions, do they actually correspond to an actual direction, like the same thing, like the front left right one is like north, and then the opposite one would be south?
Well, it's interesting that you called them the card. What does that mean, the cardinal directions?
Just like north, south, east, west.
Ah, because, yeah, right. Well, let's put it like this. As you know, because we've done this before when we did the map of how the tribes were laid out and the directions, and we talked a lot about that, what the directions mean.
Yeah.
North being darkness and hidden, and so on, and south being wisdom, and so on. So, yes, there is that kind of coordination, but it's not really like you can say that the front left is north and the other one is east, because a person's always changing and moving. I mean, so what could be north could be south a minute later. I mean, in the sense of a person turning around, unless you want to, in Judaism, when we look at a map, we don't put north at the top. We put east at the top. So that north is actually what you would call west, and south is what we would call east. And north is east. It's because that's the direction that everything is heading towards, is heading towards the east.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean,
That,
not modern maps, but if you look at
yeah,
like rabbis' maps,
yeah. That's pretty interesting. That is really interesting. I'm gonna have to take note of that. Okay. So, about the war. Last time I think it was the last time we spoke, you had the feeling that, in me too, that Hamas is just like a pawn in like a larger thing. Do you still, like, after, this time since between last time we talked and now, do you still feel like this could be the war of Gog and Magog, or do you think things are gonna like calm down, like the war is gonna be won by Israel, and then like do you have any like what are your feelings about that?
Well, I like your choice of word, feelings, as opposed to thoughts, because really intellectually, how could anybody know? I mean, do you even know next week's lottery numbers? And if you do, can you please tell me them?
Yeah,
Okay. I can't remember the name. There's a philosopher who said that our eyes look forward and the only direction we can see is in hindsight. So,
like that.
but when you talk feelings, I can share feelings for sure. So the thing with the feelings is when you read the book of Esther and you study the whole Purim war and all of those events, the story seems to be like over a, I don't know, a few month, maximum 1 year span. It seems like that. But when you really drill down, you find that that whole story is like 13, 14, 15 years long. So when we look at that story in hindsight, we can see how all God's magic kind of lined up with the king of the world, Achashverosh, and he kills his wife Vashti, and then suddenly the evil Haman rises to power, and and then next thing you know, you got a nice little Jewish girl, and poof, she's the queen of the world, married to Achashverosh. We see it like that, but when you're living in it, you wouldn't necessarily, because of the time spans, know how to plug those things together. So from a godly point of view, it could be that what we're calling the war right now in Gaza may calm down. I know the U.S. are pulling out their fleets now, and the Israelis have sent the army in Israel is the Provi, the soldiers, let's say, and the reserves. So the reserves are all being sent home now.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of indications of that. But on the other hand, does that mean if in 3 months from now suddenly poof we're back in with Hezbollah in the north, or we're dealing with the Houthis in Yemen, or maybe even Iran, or maybe there'll be, once the Iranians, which is not so far away, having a nuclear power bomb with the missile capability, maybe it'll be a 1-2 punch. Maybe there'll be a coordination of the Iranian firing their missiles at the same time North Koreans might be firing their missiles, to really kind of kick the ball off and get it rolling. I mean, that's the point. I used to say, if you ever want to know what's going to happen in the future, read what the experts write, because then you know for sure what won't happen. I've never seen an expert, especially of these people. I'm not making fun, but it's funny. How's that? There are these people who like kind of, I'm making this a joke. They look in their crystal ball, but they use other things, tarot cards and blah, 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 blah. And they predict this and they predict that. Do you never notice nobody predicted 9/11?
Yeah.
No, I mean, why was it a little teeny beep? How could somebody miss that? So that's why I'm saying you don't really know necessarily. Gavo Mogag is going to be way beyond 9/11, that's for sure. But it's really hard to know. However, on the other hand, there are, as you said, incredible signs and things happening here that speeds and what we see. I mean, I walk around the streets of Tel Aviv and there are Israeli flags all over the place. These were guys who were calling themselves a minute ago post-Zionist modernists, and the flags are all over. And you see these huge posters of total like ponytailed secular Israelis with their hands over their eyes saying Shema Yisrael. I mean, this is incredible kind of stuff on a spiritual level, and this hits a lot of notes upstairs. And it's interesting. I had lunch with a gentleman today. He said, "Listen, there's nothing God can't do. There's no such thing as God not being it, and He can do anything at any second, anywhere. So then the question is, why isn't He? Well, that means there are other systems God's making. Maybe He wants this or this before that or that. I mean, who knows? Can't figure out God. Can't figure out my own head. Certainly not God's. So, but the point of it is that the second God decides it, then it's suddenly the entire Egyptian army is drowned in the Red Sea.
Hmm. Yeah.
Suddenly balls of fire and ice come down on the planet. I mean,
Yeah. It's funny because, talking about the experts, like they obviously do the best that they can do. They have good information, but I remember specifically, and I think it was last year in 2023, I was reading something about Hamas before the war started, and their analysis was that, well, Hamas wouldn't be interested in war because, they're trying to hang on to power and they have like political struggles, and so they wouldn't do anything. And then later in the year, no, they actually did. They basically performed a suicide mission, and that's what we're going through right now. Don't know how it's going to end,
Well, I would call it a
but
suicide mission. I would call it more a sort of recreation of the Nazi party.
yeah,
I mean, this is Holocaust material here. And I
yeah,
guess maybe it's God's way because, look, let's step out of current events and let's go like beep, up to heaven for a minute, because that's really the place to be. So from a heavenly point of view, we know that really what God is doing now, and I'll use the language here of what the Midrash says. The Midrash says that in the end of days, God's going to take a string or whatever, and he's going to put an angel here and an angel here, and he's going to have them fly at, I don't know, angel speed. I'm sure that's beyond, even the F-36s or what. Angel speed in opposite directions so that this is going to go wah, 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 wah. And why is that happening? Because this will be called the string of faith. And in the string of faith, a lot of people think they have faith, but when it goes like this, if you're really not holding tight, whee, you go flying off. So God's going to have a situation where it's going to seem that the helpless little Jewish people who aren't even 1% of the world population, and yet they occupy more media time in the entire planet than the Chinese, who are serious market share, right? That's just a proof of how God is moving things around. And since the Muslims like to play as if they're the poor, innocent ones, because they push their children into the gunfire and so on and so on, and they build their headquarters under hospitals. The truth of the matter is that they like to hit the Jews because, and people like to make fun of the Jews because if you make a satire of the Jew, he's probably not going to come into your office and shoot you in the head like he did at the newspaper in Paris when they put out a piece about Muhammad.
I
So
remember that.
therefore, nobody's talking about the Islam, no, except nice stuff, because everybody's terrified because people are wimps. So therefore, God's going to put a lot of evil in the world. And that evil in the world is going to be each individual's chance to vote. Do you buy into the evil? I don't mean you, God forbid. Does a person buy into the evil because they're scared or because whatever, or they buy the lies or whatever? Or is a person going to understand that I am being tested and I don't want to fail this test? Because once the big guy gets here and everything starts to move, it's going to happen so quickly, as we know from our traditions, that at that point, each individual will have to stand before God. And that's going to be it. Were you in or were you out? And so therefore, we have a real time, real situation down here in theater Earth where each individual is going to have to make that little vote. Am I going out there to those pro-Palestinian demonstrations, which are not even flying American flags on American soil? That's kind of interesting, right? Or am I understanding that this is God's land, God's people, God's Bible? The Bible's dear to me, and it's supposed to be dear to all human beings. I mean, that's how I kind of see what's going on right now. I'll tell you another crazy thing. I probably shouldn't say this, especially since you're recording it. This might be the last time you'll ever see me when the NSA comes to get me. But I'll tell
Okay.
you a really interesting thing. We believe that the template of everything that happens in the end of days was already happening in the days of Haman, Mordechai, Esther, the Purim story. Let's take a look at the Purim story. In the Purim story, Esther makes a VIP only, finding my English. We have to do this weekly. I'm losing my English. I'm sorry.
All right,
VIP,
VIP only. Yeah, very important person. Yeah.
no, but a VIP banquet.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And she invites King of planet Earth, Achashverosh, and Haman. And Achashverosh is startled. Why? You're my wife, and you came and you asked me. Why is he here? What's that all about? And then at one point, she starts to say, hey, you know what? My people, there's a decree that there'll be the final solution was long before the Nazis. It was in the days of Haman, because this is Amalek. Amalek is all about kill Jews. That's it. So therefore, he says, who is this evil person? Now, our sages tell us that she was going to point at Achashverosh, the king of the world. And the angel Gabriel had to smack her hand that she instead would point to Haman. Now, Haman's obvious. Haman's obvious. If you just read the storyline of Esther, Ahasuerus doesn't seem like that bad a guy. Just seems like a politician. he just kind of, whatever the polls are, that's what he'll do. So when all of a sudden the Nazis seem to be the thing that's happening, or the Amalekites, same thing. So yeah, go ahead, wipe them all out, and I'll take that money, no problem whatsoever, and have a big banquet and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, when you realize, whoa, everything's turning around. Oh, here come the Jews again. Hey, no problem. Now Mordecai is invited in, and the ring that he gave to Haman, he now gives the ring to Mordecai. Okay, so he's a jerk, or he's a politician, probably the same thing, right? So, but Haman's the real evil guy. So why would Esther want to point to the king of the world? Why? Because the truth is that the king of the world was more dangerous than Haman. Because we know that Hamas are the bad guys. We know that they're the enemy. But there's a bigger force, at least not God's force, the bigger force that God allows in this world that's really working here. And that force is kind of like, if you remember the term good cop, bad cop, they're both on the same team. But this way, the guy thinks, oh, he's the good cop, I'll work with him. And that's how the good cop gets more information. In the military, I'm sure you learned this. You have to always know where your enemy is. Sorry, you always know where your friends are, and you keep them near you, but you keep your enemy closer, because as close as you keep your real enemy, then you know everything about them. So it's a question, right? Here, Gallant, one of the military leaders of our country, said, we're going to go and kill everyone who's Hamas, especially the multi-billionaires. Oh, wait, no military. The thousands are starving, poor little people. Forget the billionaires in Qatar, those guys, in yachts and all. Forget that, because you never see that in your media. So therefore, it doesn't really exist. So who's protecting them in Qatar? The unbelievable legionnaires of the Qatar army? I don't think so. So who's protecting them? And they just flew to Egypt a couple of weeks ago for a failed deal on hostages, on grandmothers and babies, besides the ones they put in the oven. And then there was a journalist in Gaza that they used baking powder. And now, thank God, there's an Israeli bullet in his brain. He's dead. Okay, so who's protecting those guys? It's hard for the Mossad to knock these guys out in a minute. No, there's a bigger power here, playing a little bit of a game, like the Achashverosh. That's what's going to be the thing. This is what we're told, that even God, so to speak, says when it becomes clear who is Gog, as opposed to God, even God's going to say, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know it would come from the land of the good guys. So that's as much as I'm going to say on it. I'm going to throw it out. All you need to do, if you wanted a little homework, is watch the strained situations right now between Biden and Netanyahu. I'm not getting involved in American politics, but Biden did sit for 8 years behind Obama, who was clearly a big supporter of the Muslim world and gave unbelievable amounts of cash to Iran just before he left power, and many, many other interesting events. And you have a vice president. You can't claim you don't know anything about what's going on as a VP, because you might be, you're one bullet away from becoming the president. So just throwing some thoughts out there. I was originally a New York boy. I like to stir it up.
That is some, well, yeah, I could totally, I see that. Going back to the idea of like the angels pulling on the string and putting in your vote, I was thinking, is that basically what the third chapter of Joel kind of has to do with when it's talking about the valley of Jehoshaphat and what side?
I forgot I'm talking to one of you guys who mopped the floor with people like me with verses from the Bible. It's so impressive. I tell you, you make me feel about that big, but I appreciate it. Yes, you are correct.
Okay, cool. Let's see, what else was I going to say? My mind went blank. Do you have any other insights as to like things that are going on that seem to be converging and preparing for Mashiach, for the Messianic age? Like, are there other things going on that people
Well,
outside of Israel may not know or be aware of?
wow. I mean, I hope I hope your people, at least, that we have a tradition that says when the Messiah comes, it'll be very good for the people of all the nations and horrible for their leaders. Because in every country, even in Iran, there are a lot of very, very good people. Every country has very good people. Afghanistan, Pakistan, they're very good people there. India, all over, Russia. But the leadership has a lot of money at stake, a lot of power, a lot of military. I mean, don't forget, the arms industry is the number one industry on this planet. That
Yeah.
that says a lot, right? It says a lot about attitude. Like, so fun. So anyhow, therefore, one of the saddest things is when I hear about what the media distortions and the social media distortions, which are even so much crazier. So what happens is you have like all these really nice college kids who really mean well, who really have a desire for social justice and all the rest of it. And somehow or another, the Palestinian-Israeli issue is the number one cause of the whole world. And things like climate change that could cause all of Europe to be flooded in the next 5 years. I mean, okay, they still talk a little bit about it. Or what happened to the war in Ukraine and Russia? Oop, lost media attention. Oh, bye, guys. Good luck. Work it out yourselves. We got to go cover the Jews. So, what I think people don't realize is, or maybe they do, and I'm not aware of it, we know that God organizes the majority of the nations of the world to create a United Nation force to come and attack Israel. We know that. That's black and white in all the sources. And that United Nation army to come to attack, led by that will then be Gog and Magog. So that army needs to have public support. So right now, this is a great brainwashing opportunity that's going on in the Western world, in London and in the United States and all around, and the ability to be lawless and to go down and disrupt the lighting of the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center, or to
Mhm.
take over the George Washington Bridge and go into LAX airport. And oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, yes, you have a democracy, but you also have, I think, you have laws. Why are these people above you? Most of these people aren't even your citizens, by the way. And they're just, students who are on visas because Qatar gave so much money to your leading universities. And part of that was to open up a Near East department, which never existed when you were a kid in college. I don't think they had a Near East department. And so they build these Near East departments. And part of the money has to be that they have to hire people that Qatar approves. And it doesn't have to be that they come in as Muslims, but they all have Holocaust denial. That's another thing. Everyone's screaming that the Jews are doing genocide, which is so. The Israeli army is probably the most ethical army on the planet. And yet people are calling genocide. And yet, where there was a documented genocide called the Holocaust, they're the greatest deniers. How's that for an irony? We have a
Yeah.
real Holocaust? No, never happened. We have no Holocaust? It's Holocaust. So this is getting into the mentality of making Israel evil. And the result will be, therefore, when certain nations say, okay, come on, the only way is we have to do it ourselves, and let's make a united army, and let's go get Israel. A lot of people will support that because they'll have already been brainwashed that Israel is evil or God is evil,
Yeah.
or or maybe now we have our own God called AI, so we don't really need DI, divine intelligence.
I like that. Yeah, that's definitely something that's going on, like the war for public opinion between everything that you just said. And like I've said before, I think we talked about this, you and me, but I've talked about it on my channel. I really think that the reason why Hamas was so brutal was not just because they're bad, they are bad, but because they wanted Israel. I think they wanted Israel to do exactly what they're doing. And I remember in the early part of the war, Iran was like making threats, like, time's almost up, and we're not going to be able to keep back if you do your ground invasion. But they did the ground invasion, and Iran hasn't done anything. And so, like, all this time is going by, and more and more people are becoming radicalized, like, what you said. And I feel like Iran or whoever, Gog, Magog, they're like holding back, being like, look, we're showing maximum restraint. Like every day that goes by, they can make that argument to the rest of the world, like, because like I guess if they ever move forward with like the main thing and they try and destroy Israel, they can say, look, we gave them every opportunity, we gave them multiple warnings, they went all the way. And so I feel like on all different fronts, there's like this like psychological operation going on so that as many people as possible will be on board.
That's right. Yeah, right. That's right. And
Yeah.
that's the string.
And then the other thing you jogged my memory. What I wanted to ask was, I think it was within the last like week or two. Gallant was like giving a press briefing, and he was talking about the fact that Israel is currently engaged in a seven front war, and that they've responded to six, the seventh being Iran. They haven't done that yet. Did you hear that, or did that catch your attention? And do you find that interesting that it's a seven front, the number seven front war?
I hadn't thought about the number seven in terms of a mystical number. I did think I mean I do know that I mean who knows what's going to happen again come back we don't know the lottery number but I do know that the attitude here is that this war doesn't end until it's Israel and Iran. This is like cleaning the garbage out of the way. The guy who put all the burning tires to stop you from getting to him, well, those burning tires could be shoved to the side.
Yeah,
Here's another little interesting caveat. Are you aware of what's going on with the Houthis and the Red Sea?
yeah.
You know that Egypt makes $9.6 billion a year on the Suez Canal?
No, I guess it doesn't surprise me, but no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, okay, maybe it's 9.3, whatever. Uh, but it's a little interesting. Why aren't the Egyptians bombing the Houthis? I mean, it's not a Jewish or Israel problem. It's a major problem. Now, the Americans have come in, and the Americans are shooting down these missiles. Well, okay, do you know the Houthis are? What do you know about the Houthis?
Well, I know that
Or you don't give a Houthi.
they're aligned with Iran, and
No,
they
no,
have
no, no. What's their history? Where they come from? Who are they?
I have no idea. I haven't
It's
looked
oh,
into it.
fine. They're a family. They're family.
So it's like a tribe, like a clan or
That's
something.
right. That's right. And they took over Yemen, and not by vote, just by savage brutality. But who cares? Because right, it's not Jews, so who cares? As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something. I have a very dear friend of mine who's a Palestinian activist, and he travels the world speaking on different things. And he was invited to Congo, and he met the revolutionary people there. And I don't know if you know this, but in Congo over the last 10 years, 5.5 million people have been slaughtered. I'm sure you must.
5.5 million.
Yeah, do your homework. That's the thing about today. You can always check up on everything in Google.
I'll
And
look into that because that's a very large number. Yeah.
it's a very large number. And the point that they made to him is they said to him, you're really blessed that Israel is your enemy. Because as long as Israel is your enemy, everyone will be behind you. But over here, Congo, who cares? Nobody really cares about people. They really did. Where were all the demonstrations in the United States? Anyhow, but I
Yeah.
just want to make an interesting point. So the Houthis are just one family. And so most people say, who gives a Houthi, right? But the point is, there's just one family, and they have a tremendous amount of money and training, all provided by Iran, and weapons, maybe North Korea as well. But they have these major stockpiles, and they have their airports, their military airports. Why don't they get bombed? Don't go in there and kill civilians. Don't put Marines on the ground. Don't do that. Just take out their supplies. Why is that not happening? What kind of game is going on here? It's a showing of power. We're knocking down rockets out of the sky. Well, why would you do that? Why not? If this is a real problem, and it's a major problem in terms of international boat movements and so on, it's maybe 4 hours and you'll never hear about the Houthis again. And not only that, if you knock that down, then the real Yemenites will actually have a revolution and get back their country.
It's interesting. Well, I do know now, I guess we'll have to see what happens. I do know that there's going to be some kind of like joint military operation, the UK, US, and then another European country that's supposed to take place soon. So I guess we'll
Yeah,
see.
that would be wonderful if that's what it
But
is.
if it doesn't happen like you said, then yeah, I guess that's a big question. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, another thing I feel like is kind of, converging or paving the way is just how like there's all these things going on. For the first like big distraction seemed to be, or the first thing to draw everybody's attention to it was the Ukraine war. And I feel like that led to the decision to do the war in Israel, because now the West and the US are focused on Russia, and now this war is going on. And then recently Venezuela supposedly claims that they've annexed part of Guyana, and now Xi Jinping just in his New Year's address talked about Taiwan. That was like a big part of it. So I feel like a lot of people are starting to like, it's like those what do you call it when you have a bunch of people go into like a gas station or they go to a store and they loot it, like a big gang looting or whatever, a group looting. I feel like that's kind of what's happening right now. People are just kind of like going for what they want because now's the time to do it because attention is divided every which way. And so I feel like that might be another thing that could be a sign that we're getting to that point.
Yeah, well, your upcoming elections of 24 will be very interesting as well.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they definitely will. That's going to be another, oh my gosh. It's going to be a crazy year.
Yeah, well, that's the old Chinese curse.
What's
May you
that?
live in interesting times.
It is definitely interesting times. There's so
But
much
don't
stuff.
forget, just listen, my friend, don't forget there is God,
Yeah,
and nothing ever slipped through God's fingers. So whatever it is, although our little pea brain can't begin to understand what God's brain thinks, we can know that it is God's brain thinking, thank God, and just be the best you can be. And when we get upstairs, there's a much better world waiting there. This is
yeah,
just a passageway or a growing test ground. God said God wanted to give kindness to the world, but he didn't want them to be like poor people who are embarrassed when they receive charity. So he created this whole thing just out of love in order to give man, I mean, man meaning male, female, of course, but to give man the ability to earn the kindness that God will give him or her through actions, through thought, through speech, through what we think are the little things, like you see a poor person go over, give them a hot dog, or talk nicely to one's wife, or somebody gets you upset, but you kind of cool it down and you give them a benefit of a doubt. These things which don't ever make any newspaper, these are the things that God watches, and these are
I
the
like
things that
that.
will save and protect all of us.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up with this because we're coming up on an hour. I wanted to go back to the seat seat really quick. So is it just up to you? It's like your prerogative whenever you want to wear the four
Ah,
cornered
right,
garment
that's right.
or is there yeah.
You're right. So that's right. That I went astray on that particular point. So technically, it's as I shared with you. If you have that garment, you have to wear. I mean, if you're Jewish, you have to wear the tzitzis on that garment. But since it is a commandment, so many Jews specifically put on a four-garment garment in order to fulfill the commandment of wearing the tzitzis, even though one need not put on a four-corner garment. By the way, the big what we call the talisim that you see when we wrap the prayer shawls, I think that's
Mhm.
what it's English. Those also have the tzitzits on them because it's also a large four-corner garment being worn as a garment.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was only on like the smaller four
No,
quarter garments. So that's news
no,
to me.
no. It's on the Tallit as well. And there, the Tallit doesn't have a hole like where the head goes through, like on the smaller ones. It's just one block of material, but it's a square. Well, it's a rectangle. So that doesn't mean the garment's square, it means that the corners are squared off. And so therefore, and when you put it on, you're wearing it as a garment, cloak.
Yeah. And I suppose I'm trying to like picture it, but the Jerusalem robe, that's not a four cornered thing. It's like an actual robe. So you wouldn't have that on there, right?
Right. You can have it on even on some of the modern suits. The blazer can have right because you have where the buttons are, and then it can have an opening in the back, so you could actually that could actually have four corners. Again, if they're rounded corners, it's nothing. But if it's square corners, then technically they might actually require tzitzis also. Although I've never seen anyone wear tzitzis. In fact, a lot of times if they have it open in the back, they sew it closed so that it's only a two-corner jacket, the front where the buttons go.
Is it mostly a male thing or do females, sorry, talking like military, men and women, do women sometimes wear it too?
Well, okay, the basic differentiation between men and women in their responsibilities to the commandments is a commandment which is a positive commandment, requires us an affirmative action, and it's rooted in time. In other words, it has a fixed time window. Women are exempt from that. So therefore, they don't have the same affinity as a man would. So tzitzis, technically, the only time they're worn is on the day, during the day hours. So therefore, it's a day, or it's a time-bound commandment between sunrise to sunset. And it's a positive commandment because you have to do something to perform it. So therefore, women are not exempt. That doesn't mean a woman can't, but I've never actually seen a woman do so.
Mm. You're supposed to take it off after sundown. Like is it just that you're supposed to wear it from sun up to sundown, or is it you're supposed to take it off when it's dark?
Right. So I, for example, wear it 24/7, and
Okay.
many people do because it still has a lot of protective powers, even if it's not. I look like this. The difference is there's the commandment and there are the pun intended fringe benefits. Okay?
Okay.
Because there's strings attached. So so the commandment part goes away with the sunset. But all of these activities are still viable and there. So
Yeah.
therefore one wears it, doesn't need to, but people do and I do. Some
Okay.
people even have a different set that they wear for sleeping at night because this is kind of cool. Let's say sunrise is 5:30 in the morning and you're not planning to get up till 7. Well, that's hour and a half of potential mitzvah time. So if you take that hour and a half potential mitzvah time, you times it by 365 days and then by 70 years, that's a huge chunk of time. Seems like what's an hour and a half? But now you have a huge block of time. So if you're wearing tzitzis from the night, even though you're sound asleep, when the sun goes up, bing, this little mitzvah comes to life. And so by the time you wake up, you've already like ramped up that in your bank account.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll close on that. So,
By the way, I want to tell you a funny thing.
yeah.
Isn't it interesting? You talked about the tzitzits, which are the threads, and then we talked about the thread of faith. And the end of the day is kind of how it like all wrapped together.
Yeah. Well, so like we said, we're gonna be doing this once a month now, just because I've been really busy on the channel and doing other things, but I still want to talk to Rabbi Gerfine. So expect another video next month, and I guess we'll see where we're at that point. Things are going
God
really
willing.
quick these days, and if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below, and also any questions that you may have for Rabbi Gerfine, and we'll ask him next time. Sorry we didn't do it this time. And I'll talk to you guys later.